Jonathan Wild was not a nobleman or serial killer. He was an early 1700s London crime boss, thief-taker, informer, and receiver of stolen goods who publicly acted like a crime fighter while secretly controlling thieves. Britannica lists him as born around 1682 in Wolverhampton and hanged at Tyburn on May 24, 1725. The National Portrait Gallery identifies him as the thief-taker general, informer, and receiver of stolen goods. The most dangerous criminal in London did not hide from the law. He worked beside it. In the early 1700s, the streets of London were crowded, dirty, loud, and dangerous. At night, the city changed. Alleys became traps. Taverns became meeting rooms for thieves. Coaches were stopped on dark roads. Pockets were cut in busy markets. Homes were broken into while families slept. The people wanted protection. The law wanted results. And one man saw the perfect opportunity. His name was Jonathan Wild. To the public, he was a hero, a man who caught thieves, a man who returned stolen property, a man who helped clean the streets of London. Newspapers praised him. Victims came to him for help. Authorities used him because he seemed to know exactly where criminals were hiding. But that was the lie. Jonathan Wild was not just hunting criminals. He was controlling them. He was born around 1682 in Wolverhampton, far from the London streets he would later dominate. His early life did not look like the beginning of a criminal empire. He was not born into great power. He was not a king, a nobleman, or a soldier. He was ordinary, and that made his rise even more dangerous. When Wild came to London, the city was already full of hunger, crime, and opportunity. It was a place where a man could vanish, change, and become someone new. But London did not make life easy. Wild fell into debt, and like many desperate men of the time, he ended up in prison. For most people, prison was the end of hope. For Jonathan Wild, it became a school. Inside the debtor's prison, he learned how London's criminal world worked. He listened, he watched, he understood the thieves, the fences, the informers, the victims, and the weak points in the law. By the time he walked out, he knew something that ordinary citizens did not. Crime was not chaos. Crime could be organized. And if one man controlled the thieves, the stolen goods, the victims, and the police, he could control the whole city's fear. Wild built his business around a simple public image. If something was stolen, he could help recover it. A watch, a purse, a piece of jewelry, a document, a valuable object from a wealthy home. Somehow, Wild knew where to find it. The grateful owner paid a fee. The stolen item came back, and Jonathan Wild looked like a savior. But behind the curtain, the truth was darker. Many of the thieves worked for him. Many of the stolen goods passed through his hands. He did not simply recover property. He helped create the problem, then sold himself as the solution. It was not law enforcement, it was theater. Wild became known as the thief-taker general. The title sounded official, powerful, almost noble. But it was not the title that made him dangerous. It was the trust behind it. People believed he was protecting London. In reality, he was running part of its underworld like a business. He organized thieves, he handled stolen goods. He decided which criminals were useful and which criminals were disposable. If a thief obeyed him, that thief could keep working. If a thief crossed him, Wild could destroy him with one whisper to the authorities. That was his genius. He did not need to rob every house himself. He built a system where others stole, others risked their lives, and he stood in the middle collecting money, praise, and power. To the police and courts, he delivered criminals. To the criminals, he offered protection. To the victims, he returned property. To himself, he kept control. London thought it had found a man who understood crime because he was clever. The truth was worse. He understood crime because he was running it. For years, Wild played both sides. He gave the authorities enough arrests to remain useful. He gave the public enough recovered property to remain respected. He gave criminals enough profit to keep them close. But he also gave them fear, because everyone in his world knew one thing: Jonathan Wild could save you. And Jonathan Wild could send you to the gallows. It is said that many men were hanged because of his testimony or information. Some were real criminals. Some were rivals. Some were people who had become inconvenient. In a city where justice could be brutal and fast, one powerful informer could become more frightening than a judge. Wilde's empire was not built with a crown. It was built with secrets. But every empire has a weakness, and Wilde's weakness was the same thing that made him powerful. He betrayed people for a living. Sooner or later, betrayal creates enemies. Criminals began to understand that the man calling himself their protector was also their executioner. Victims began to question how he always found stolen goods so easily. The public image started to crack. The great thief-taker began to look less like a hero and more like a man standing at the center of every crime he claimed to solve. Then, the law turned on him. For years, Wilde had used the system. Now the system began to examine him. The man who had pointed fingers at others found fingers pointing back at him. The man who had sent thieves to prison now faced prison himself. The man who had built his name on catching criminals was exposed as a criminal lord. His mask had worked for years, but it could not work forever. Jonathan Wilde was arrested, tried, and convicted. The details of his empire, his stolen goods, his informers, and his betrayals turned him from public protector into public villain. London felt cheated. The people had not just been robbed of property, they had been robbed of trust. On May 24th, 1725, Jonathan Wilde was taken to Tyburn, the place where London watched criminals die. This time, the crowd was not gathering to see one of the thieves Wilde had handed over. They were gathering to see him, the thief-taker, the informer, the man who had pretended to fight crime while feeding from it. At Tyburn, the double life ended. Jonathan Wilde was hanged, but his story did not die with him. His name became a warning about corruption hiding inside authority, about a man who understood that the easiest way to control fear was to pretend to protect people from it, about a criminal who did not run from the law, but learned how to wear its face. That is what makes Jonathan Wilde so disturbing.